explain it, then it's just going to look like you didn't feel how you're doing. So practice, practice, practice. It's the only way to get better, but communication is very important. The third skill that you want to master is the ability to debug. So as a software developer, you're going to make a ton of mistakes. That I can guarantee. There's going to be like little tiny logic errors in your code as you're writing it. You're also going to factor in the keyboard, and you'll have a misspelled variable in JavaScript. It'll take you hours to figure out, oh my gosh, that was the problem. But it's not about not making mistakes as a software developer. It's really about the ability to find out where the mistake is and fix it as quickly as possible. And the only way you can do that is through being an effective debugger. Now, being an effective debugger means that you have to know the tools that are available for what you're working on, so the programming language, technology that you're working on, but then also knowing how to go through the process of elimination to find out where that bug is, where that error is. The only way you get better at this, by the way, is building a lot of projects on your own, making a ton of mistakes, and just going to the debugger every time and find that process that works for you for figuring it out. A lot of people hate that, by the way, because they feel like when they make an error, it's holding them back, it's stopping them from making progress. But anytime you come onto an error, use it as an opportunity to learn about how to debug and how to figure out where the problem lies. Because when you go to a company and you're writing code, you're still going to be making mistakes. You're going to have to track down bugs too. That's going to be part of your job as well. You want to get good at this early on. It will make you really good at reading code, by the way. It will make you really good at writing code too, because you'll see problems with the way you wrote code. You'll be able to implement a lot of those clean code principles as well. So practice, practice, practice. Get good at debugging. It really makes you stand out from a lot of other people that are out there. The fourth skill that you'll want to master as a developer is the ability to finish projects. There's nothing worse than seeing a new program portfolio on GitHub and seeing that most of the projects aren't finished, they're 50% done, 80% done, or even worse, I pulled down their code, there's errors, there's bugs, the code doesn't compile. Think about it from an employer's perspective. If they're looking at it and that's what they're seeing, it's a really bad sign. I get why this happens. A lot of you guys, you're building a project, you get really excited about it, but then you run into the hard part, right? There's some complicated logic, or there's just something that you don't really quite understand how to proceed with, and so you work on it for a few days, and you eventually get to the point where you're like, you know what, I want to start on something new, so I feel like I'm progressing. So you start a new project, the same thing happens, you get about 80% done, and all of a sudden you switch to the next thing, Also, you have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 projects out there that are half complete or 80% complete or whatever. So you don't want to do this. I mean, look, as a software developer, there are going to be times where you are stuck on a single problem that's not letting you proceed for days. It happens. You have to have that stamina, that mental discipline to stick with it and really try your best to figure out from different angles. Doesn't mean that you sit there for 8 hours a day and just think about a single problem, but you're going to want to experiment, tweak things, test things out. That's part of being a software developer. When you get hired, by the way, they're not going to give you a work item or a bunch of things and say, hey, you know what? Just get about 80% of the way there, that's all we need. They're expecting you to complete that work item, to finish it. And the only way you're going to do that is if you practice it on your own. Going through the tough things or figuring out some of the hardest problems that you have to work on will give you that confidence that when you get into a job, you can pretty much handle whatever is thrown at you. So the only cure for this, of course, is practice, 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 but making sure that you are sticking through the hard parts of the projects and actually finishing them. The fifth skill I think you should master is working with source control. Specifically, I mean Git. For some of you guys out there, you might be surprised to hear this, because Git really doesn't have that much to do with programming. It doesn't help your programming skills, but because Git is so widely used now, and it's really the de facto way to share code, right, via GitHub, I think it's one of the most important skills to learn, because if you go to a company and you're a really good software developer, but you don't really know Git, and that company uses Git, it's going to be hard for them to onboard you to that process, because that's how a lot of software development companies or software development teams work. So you want to learn the basics of Git. I'm talking about obviously how to work with Git, the basics, how to create commits, create repositories, but also how Git branching works, how rebasing works, how merging works, how to clone. All these things are really important in Git. And Git isn't really complicated, but when you first get into it, it can be a lot broad, especially if you're not used to working with the terminal or the command line. So I recommend to really make sure you know it very well and you feel comfortable with most of the fundamentals and basics. If you don't, again, I think it can just look kind of bad if you go there and you don't really know how to contribute from the very beginning in terms of using source control properly and getting into the workflow that most software developers are used to. So those are the 5 skills that I recommend that you master if you really want to make this career change and stand out from the rest of the crowd. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, as the YouTube algorithm really loves that. Also, if you think I left something out, please leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Other than that, guys, if you are interested in making this career change into software development and you want to work with me one-on-one to do that, I would highly recommend checking out my mentorship program. In that mentorship program, I really work with people to help them achieve their goals in this field. If you're interested in inquiring about the mentorship program, what I would recommend you do is to book a call with me, a career strategy session. During that call, what we do to figure out things that are a good fit is number one, figure out what your issues are, what is going on, what are the problems you're having, what do you need my help with, as well as what your goals are. I want to figure out what you're trying to do to see if everything is a good fit. If it works, we can talk about mentorship, what it would look like for you, and take it from there. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend going to the link in the description below and booking a call as soon as possible as times do fill up rather quickly. Other than that, that's all I have for today. Thank you as always for watching, and peace out, guys. I've made previous videos before about how to improve your study habits as a self-taught software developer. And I'll put that video up right here. I highly recommend watching that if you haven't, but what I've seen is that a lot of people will apply these habits, but they're still not totally getting a good study system down. And if you don't get a good study system down, you're gonna struggle long-term. And so what I want to talk about in this video is the biggest thing that I see people make mistakes on with their study system that if they don't quite fix will make it hard to do this long-term. And by the way, this problem or this worst habit that I've seen people do is something that I did for a while. So I'm not, actually very familiar with this, but we're gonna go ahead and talk about that. Before we do, if you don't know who I am, I'm Andy Sterkwitz. I'm a self-taught software developer. I taught myself to code back in 2014. I landed my first job in 2015. And now this channel is dedicated to people who want to do the same thing. So I really cover some high-level stuff about how to become a software developer, how to learn better, how to get that first job, so you can make that transition as well. So if you're interested in content like that, I can't recommend enough to hit the subscribe button below. Also make sure to hit that bell icon because you get notifications at any time I put out a new video. So I think to really best understand what I'm about to get at here, we should really go back in a time machine back to 2014 when I was learning to code. Back then, I actually didn't have great study habits. I never really figured that out in high school. I was a terrible student, and so when I was 27 or 28 years old, whenever this was, I still was doing a lot of bad things. Kind of give you a picture of where I was at in my life. I was working full-time as a car salesman. My weekends were spent studying. After work, I would spend studying as well. So I was pushing it to the limit. I was highly motivated to do this, but I was finding that I was having a lot of issues. I feel like I was sort of like carrying some sack of bricks behind me everywhere I was going because it felt like things were difficult, like things weren't smooth. And that's something that is different from how I am now. Like I feel like the study process is a lot smoother, but the point is that it felt very difficult. It felt like I was kind of grinding my teeth all the time. And a couple problems that I had. Number one, I felt guilty a lot. Like I kind of had this feeling of guilt all the time. I wasn't really doing enough. I also felt like I wasn't really enjoying the process. I felt like I resented the process of studying a lot. I felt like I was drained of energy a lot, meaning I could kind of drag myself around to work and then back to studying, but I didn't feel like the vibrancy. I didn't feel like I had a lot of energy at the time. And then overall, I felt like my progress was just not going as fast as I wanted to in the early days, like the first month of studying. And after a while, I started to really critically look at what I was doing, and I noticed that there was one thing that kept coming up. It was really this lack of clear boundaries between work and play. For example, when I would kind of get bored of studying, I'd be in a long study session. I told myself I had to study for like 3 or 4 hours straight without breaking. Well, when I'd be in one of those study sessions, I would open up the computer and start playing a movie or something. Or maybe I was coding and I'd start playing a movie in the background, or I'd play a podcast or something because I thought to myself, hey, I need to relax a little bit. And I would do things as well as like if a friend wanted to hang out, I just wanted to study, so what do I do here? So I would just invite them over and tell them, look, I'm going to study while we watch this movie. So I would study with my laptop open, we'd be watching a movie, and I'd be going back and forth between these activities. But this really was the root of my problems, meaning that I was not really having clear rules about what it meant to work and what it meant to have free time. Like, what was the threshold for myself that I could feel good about? If I studied for 5 hours a day, was that enough? Was 1 hour enough? Like, what was it? I didn't have these rules in my head. And so that's really the message that I want to send to a lot of you guys today, is that if you find that you're struggling a lot with just the motivational side of things. So if you feel like you're feeling guilty all the time, like you're not doing enough, or if you feel like you just don't enjoy this, you enjoy coding, but you don't enjoy the process of learning and sitting down every day and figuring out how to do it every day, and maybe you just don't feel like you're making progress, it could stem from a lack of boundaries. So what does it mean to have boundaries between work and your free time? So what I basically look at in my head is this. When I'm sitting down to study, I have specific rules. So for example, when I study, I either study for 25 minutes at a time with a 5-minute break, or I study for 45 minutes at a time with a 15-minute break. Meaning there is not a single time where I sit down to study or do work, but there's not a timer going. It doesn't tell me when to stop. The reason that I do this is because I know how important it is to get away from the work. Meaning that my brain is not a machine, it's more like a muscle that needs rest before it can do intense work. So I like short, brief periods of intense work followed by breaks, right? And I stick to that, I'd say 90 to 95% of the time. And when I don't follow that, I get into trouble. Another thing is that when I'm working, right? So in other words, no distractions, period. I don't have my phone in front of me, I'm not allowed to check email, social media, no way. Like, it's just not allowed to happen during those work periods. When my timer goes off and now I have a 15 or a 5-minute break, my rule about that free time is I can do whatever I want. I cannot do work, so in other words, I actually have to step away. I force myself to step away, but I can do anything I want under the sun as long as it's not work. And what that has really allowed for me to do is to free up a lot of that sort of like ambiguity, meaning like unclear thoughts in my head about what am I doing? Am I doing enough? Am I getting enough done? I know that when I sit down to work, I'm being efficient and I'm spending the time that I need to spend. Now, another thing that I do is if I'm studying or if I'm in a position where I need to get in so much time a day, I basically decide that there's a certain threshold I can hit on a certain day or every day of the week or total per week, that once I hit that threshold, I can choose to go and do whatever I want. So when I'm working out with friends for the rest of the day, I can do that. No guilt whatsoever. What happens for most people, and I did this as well, is I assume that every waking hour, any free time I get, had to be used to study, to learn to code, to think about the code. But the truth is that I tried that for a long time. I tried that for a few weeks, and I became just sort of drained all the time because your brain, again, is more like a muscle. It needs time to relax so that it can power through and really go hard in small brief periods. It's just critical that you clarify these things to yourself, and that when you sit down to work, that you have the discipline to make sure you're not allowing distractions, and when you're taking time off, that you have the discipline to not allow yourself to get sucked back into work. Because the worst thing you can do is not actually take breaks, right? Like when your timer goes off to stop working, you just sit there and keep working, and all of a sudden you're 3 hours in, and you start getting frustrated because you haven't had that time off. So this idea of boundaries is a simple one, meaning simple to understand, but it's actually harder than you think to implement if you're not doing it. So I hope this video has been helpful, but please make sure to take some time and really think about what this means and to develop your own system, of course, for boundaries and what that means, what those rules are, and then more than anything else, apply discipline and time to try to work that in, because I guarantee you it will give you results over time. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. By the way, if you want to get more content from me, I have a free Facebook group that I started. I will link to it in the description below if you want to join. In that group, I try to provide more content. I try to keep the spammers out as much as possible, but that's really all I have for today. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and as always, hey there, what's going on? I'm Andy. I'm a self-taught programmer, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 reasons why you're not going to become a programmer anytime soon. And they come from my experience of talking to a wide range of people who are aspiring developers, and seeing patterns of behavior, things that really hold people back. And my goal in this video is to really shine a light on some of the mistakes you may be making so that you can overcome them and so you don't get stuck. I'm really trying to take years to figure this out and really take it down to a matter of months if possible. Now, if you're new here and you're wondering who I am, I'm Andy Sterkowitz. I'm a self-taught programmer, but I'm also a mentor and coach to everyday people who are aspiring developers. So I help them really get strategies to learn a skill set to a high degree, as well as figure out strategies for landing that first job. So if you're interested in content like that, I highly recommend hitting the subscribe button below, but also make sure to hit the bell icon to get notifications anytime I put out a new video. So with that being said, let's not waste any time here, let's get right into it. So the first mistake that I see people make as far as getting into programming is they really treat this as a purely academic pursuit, meaning they think that because the whole term computer science is thrown around, that if computer science is science, that you just treat this like chemistry or biology or physics, and you just get all the books on the subjects that you just go through them and you'll become a chemist or a biologist or something like that. And that'd be a nice comforting thing to think, but unfortunately, programming doesn't quite work that way. Learning about programming through learning resources like tutorials or books, that's a really important start. But in order for you to become a programmer who can do something with those programming languages that you're going to use, you have to get down to the nitty-gritty of building projects, building things, and using those programming languages. So don't be the person who is going to wait 6 months before you start building something. Like, to be totally honest with you don't have to wait even a couple of weeks before you start. You can start coding within your first week. In other words, you can download a code editor and just start hammering away. So don't think you have to wait. Don't think you have to get everything in line. You have to learn every single concept before you can start. Start early, start often, get your hands dirty, and use those learning resources to help you with things that you're going to be doing, the projects you're going to be doing. And you're going to be much better off. You're not going to be held back for months. The second thing that I see really hold people back is perfectionism. And by the way, I'm totally guilty of being a perfectionist, so it's okay. But the thing is, in software development, perfectionism can really hold you back. I see this a lot in people who are going to start building their portfolios. They think that their projects have to be perfect. Like they have to be to the nines. Like they have to rebuild, I would say, like Airbnb, or they have to rebuild Facebook or Twitter, and they have to make it fully functional. They have to make the styling perfect. And unfortunately, the reason that that can be very detrimental to your progress is because I see a lot of people who will just build projects, and they build what I call an MVP, or what's called an MVP, minimal viable product. They just build it, they get it completed to a pretty much like satisfactory degree, and then they move on to the next project. They just keep building projects and keep finishing things. And that person is much more farther along than the person who thinks that like they have to have everything be perfect because that's the only way that you can be a programmer. So don't get stuck in this. The same thing comes to your study habits. Like, look, if you think you have to sit down and get a 4 or 5 hour study session each time, it has to be perfect, you have to make perfect progress, you're going to really struggle because that's not reality. The truth of the matter is you're going to have study sessions where you feel like no progress is made. Sometimes you can only sit down for an hour because you just can't sit there and focus on figuring out like why your app isn't working for longer than that. So you have to get used to having these study sessions that aren't perfect, where you're not making progress, where things are just stuck, because that's what life is developers. Sometimes you're just stuck and you can't figure things out. So really take back those perfectionist tendencies as much as you can. It's going to help you make progress over feeling like everything has to be perfect. The next thing that I see that holds people back is just their fear, right? I started out talking about how people think this is an academic pursuit, more or less. Well, a lot of people who think that, they get this fear built up about building projects. So they get really comfortable in learning, right? They get very comfortable with these concepts. It's like a warm blanket, like, new concept, epiphany here, epiphany there. But they start to build a fear up of actually opening up a code editor and typing in code and building something because that's uncomfortable. And by the way, when you start building something, when you start building projects, you get a lot of feedback that you don't know how you're doing it because you have never done it before and there's no blueprint for it. And so people get very, very afraid of that. And also people get afraid of finishing projects because guess what? If you finish a project, you have to go on to the next project. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. Or maybe your next project, once that's finished, you're going to start applying for jobs. And if you're fearful of that, you may subconsciously be like, you know what, I actually need to work on my styling of my project more. And so you may delay doing that project because you just have fear of finishing and fear of going on to that next thing. So look, at the end of the day, the best developers I know can step outside their comfort zone. If they don't know a certain skill set, they don't know a certain programming language, they know that to get to that next level in their career, really just get to that next level they need to go to, they have to step outside their comfort zone, go to the very bottom, humble themselves, and start at the very bottom and say, okay, you know what, I don't know anything, let's start from there. But when you go outside your comfort zone consistently, that's where you make those progress moves. The next thing that really, really makes this process a lot longer is bouncing around. So you commonly see this with programming languages. So maybe you pick JavaScript as your first programming language, and you start learning it. First, it's fun, the concepts are so cool, they're sexy, and by about week 3, 4, 5, starts to get boring, and you just start seeing a lot of repetition. Maybe you start building a project and it's just not as fun. Maybe you build a second project and it's just not as fun as when you first started. Because you remember when you first started, everything was new. It was just so much fun. So also you say, you know what, I'm just not having a lot of fun with this. Let's go to Python or C#, and you just repeat that process over and over again. And that's not how you're going to learn to become a really strong developer. To become a strong developer, you need to learn the depth of the language, the depth of programming in general, really have strong fundamentals. And that doesn't come from bouncing around. You need to really sit down and focus when things get boring. Because look, to be honest with you, if you want to learn any skill set, if it's an athletic skill, if it's a programming skill, you have to, when things get boring, you have to really be the type of person who just persists, right? Because like, especially in sports, like learn something like footwork in basketball, it's actually super boring. Like, that's not the sexy part. The sexy part is like the crossovers, the shooting, the cool moves. But the hard part is the like endless just repetition of some of the fundamentals, like something like footwork. And so most people, they just can't do it. They just can't sit there when things get boring. They just can't like stick around and persist. But if you can be the type of person who can persist, in other words, you can sit there when things get boring with whatever programming language you're learning or whatever the skill that you're trying to learn, you're going to be the type of person who learns that to a very high degree. You'll stand out where other people don't. And that's the type of person who can get paid a lot of money or just get hired very quickly. So persist as long as you can. But here's the thing. If you're going to decide to learn a different skill or different programming language in this, that's totally fine. Make it a rational decision. Don't make it an emotional decision because you just feel like you're a little bit bored or you feel a little anxious that XYZ programming language is a new hot thing in the market. So persist as long as you can. Don't bounce around. Try to stick to one thing and learn a depth of knowledge. The last thing that I noticed that people just really struggle with is job hunt. So a lot of people, like their job hunt strategy just sucks. You have to think about it this way. A lot of people are coming out of boot camps, colleges, a lot of self-taught developers out there, and if you're competing with all of them based on the tried and true, or I should say the traditional strategy of just getting that resume out there, maybe you have a personal website that just kind of bland, LinkedIn that's not really interesting, I think that that's just not really the road to success these days because everybody's doing it. And if everybody's doing it, then you're just competing with people who are coming out of school who have better credentials than you. I don't have great credentials, so I'm not going to compete with somebody who's coming out of good school who has a computer science background. Instead, what I would prefer to compete with them on is making myself stand out from the crowd, making myself stand out in my online presence as somebody who's really passionate about this, who is clearly not just a weekend tutorial watcher who built a few projects and is like throwing something out there. Like when they see my online presence, they should see somebody who's like borderline obsessed with programming, who loves this, who's looking at this field with positive. And like I make it easy for them to access my projects. I make it easy for them to find out more about pulling in from my personal website. My LinkedIn is different, it stands out. My resume is different, it stands out in some meaningful or small way. Again, the reason I do this is because I'm not competing with people on their level. My strength is not that I went to Harvard and I got a computer science. I don't play with people on their game. That's the equivalent of if I'm going to play basketball and somebody's like a lot taller than me, I'm not going to go to the hole every time because they're just going to block me. That just doesn't make sense. I'd rather focus on my strength and try to compete with them on my strengths, not on their strengths. So you have to figure out how to stand out. Remember that recruiters are people. Like people who are going to hire you are human beings, and they want to know who you are as a human. So they're not going to hire a piece of paper, right? They're not going to look at this paper and say, I'm going to hire this person. They want to see something that's interesting because they want to get to know more about. So always be thinking about that. Like really focus on the job hunt when it comes to that. And don't just do what everybody else is doing. So look, guys, I hope this video is helpful. These are the 5 things I've really thought through and really seen patterns of behavior that hold people back. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Now, look, if you're an aspiring developer, so if you're somebody who's self-teaching and you are struggling with this, or maybe you just don't know if your roadmap is going to get you to where you want to go in as short a period of time as possible, and you're looking for professional mentorship, then I highly recommend checking out my mentorship program. My mentorship program is all about building a roadmap for you to get to where you want to go, providing support and guidance along the way, as well as figuring out the best strategies for you to land your first job. So if you're interested in that, I highly recommend booking a free career strategy session. During that call, I really figure out what the biggest obstacles are right now, what you want to do as far as your aspirations and goals are, and then if my mentorship program is a fit, I'm happy to tell you what that looks like. So if you want to book that call, check out the link in the description below and book that call. We can go from there. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Andy Sterkowitz, and in this video what I'm going to cover is, can you still become a programmer after the age of 30? I have received so many emails and comments here on my YouTube channel asking me, I'm 35, I'm 37, I'm 43, I'm 52, can I still become a programmer? Is it still a field I can get into? And so I've been dying to make a video on this about this topic, right? So I'm going to answer the question in this video, can you still become a programmer after 30? Now, if you're wondering who I am, I'm Andy Sterkowitz. I'm a self-taught programmer. I actually learned to code back in 2014. I learned the first job in 2015. And right now, I'm actually mentoring and coaching everyday people who are looking to make the transition from their non-programming career into a programming career. So this channel is all about how to cultivate the skills, how to learn, and also how to get that first job. So I highly recommend the subscribe button. Also, as well, make sure to hit the bell icon to get notifications anytime I put out a video. All right, so can you still change careers and become a programmer after the age of 30? There's some magical thing that happens after the age of 30 that prevents you or lowers your probability dramatically from actually getting that first job? The answer is no. The answer is no for many reasons. I'm not just being overly optimistic here or just trying to be positive or I'm not sowing something. Like, I really care less about whether you decide you're going to do this or not. But the truth of the matter is that there is so much demand for software developers and for web developers that it's sort of like a wild west. I love saying that because it's just a crazy time to be alive. You can teach yourself to do this. You do not have to go to school to do this. You can get into the field and get a decent paying job, and it doesn't matter about your age. Now let's be very, very clear about this before I even proceed with my argument. Is there ageism? Right? Is there age bias in the US where I live? Of course there's age bias. There's absolutely age bias. The society, like what we value in society is youth, is attractiveness, is wealth. Of course those things are true. But that's at a macro, at a high level. On a day-to-day, on a micro level, there are many companies out there who are thirsty, like they are dying for software developers to come to the company and help them make more money, right? And at the end of the day, all companies, all they want to do is make money. And so they would love to hire a software developer who's 50 years old, who's 40 years old, but that software developer, the idea is they have to be able to produce as much value as they're being paid. So if I'm going to hire you as a software developer, say I pay you $50K starting out, $50,000 in US dollars, you have to increase my bottom line by at least that much. At the very least, it's probably going to be more like 1.5 times what you're bringing in. So if you pay $50,000, I want you to the bottom line of my company, bring at least $75,000 back or more. And so you have to be able to justify why a company can do that. And so like many of the smaller companies that potentially get hired at as a software developer or web developer, they are a little bit nervous about pulling the trigger because if they hire you and your skills don't pan out, they now sunk money into you, and it just makes them very conservative about that. So going back to the whole age thing, if there's a lot of demand here, if there are companies who are dying to hire you, then they're not going to give two craps about whether you are 50 years old, 40 years old, or 30 years old, or 20 years old. In fact, that can even be an asset to you. Why? Because they want somebody who's potentially going to stay at their company for a decently long period of time. Software development, or the career of being a software developer, at least, seeing the landscape and seeing sort of just anecdotal stories from my friends, they're constantly moving around all the time. Right? They're not really staying at their companies for very long. I tend to see people stay at their companies for about 2 years before they move on because they can get a better job title at the next company, they can get better pay at the next company, and on top of that too, there's usually something exciting that they can work on that they've already mastered at their previous company, so they want to be challenged a bit more. So if a company sees that you're coming in, you've got family, and you're taking care of them, it can be an asset to them because they know you're going to stick around for longer than their 2 years. Maybe you're going to be able to cultivate your skills as you work for them, and you're going to be a very valuable asset for a very long period of time. I think just looking at my previous employers who I've stayed in touch with, it's very frustrating for them to lose their talent because the good talent is not easy to find in this career. There's just so many, there's just such a large pool of applicants. So let me leave you off with one last thing here. If you are above 30, if you're above 40, or even if you're above 50 or even 60, there's one thing that you really have to be very careful of, and that is your beliefs about this. Right? In other words, do you believe that you can get into this because your beliefs will ultimately dictate the results, right? Like, whatever external things you want, you first have to start with your internal beliefs. If you believe that this is a young man's game and that the only way you can get a job is in Silicon Valley, you got 21 years old, you're from Stanford, you got a CS degree, then what's going to happen is you're going to lose all motivation to even make an attempt to do this. Because you're going to say to yourself, why even try? Like, why even try? This is for young people. If they're just going to look at me and laugh at me because I'm 50 years old or 40 years old, then what's the worth? And so you need to be very careful about what beliefs you let in. So stop reading articles about, kids are taking over, millennials are going to make up X amount of the workforce, and they're pushing out all these boomers or whatever it is. I don't pay attention to any of that because it doesn't have any effect on you on the individual level. What you should really focus on is cultivating the skills that are necessary, practicing as much as you can, building projects, creating a portfolio, creating an online presence that allows you to get interviews and allows you to eventually get a job. And by the way, if you're with me so far, but you're still a little bit hesitant because you feel that for you in your specific situation that you are not able to learn as much as your age, right? So people think that once they get in the late 30s, 40s, and 50s, that your brain doesn't work like it once did, right? In your 20s, that was the peak, and then as you get older, things just go down slowly. I would highly recommend that you check out the book, The Brain That Changes Itself. I read this book and it completely changed the way I think about my brain, how it works, and especially as you get older, how your brain can still function at that level. The basic idea behind that book, by the way, is that your brain is very plastic, very malleable, and that you can change it to a very large degree no matter what your age is. And one of the things that he really focuses on in the book are stroke victims and how people who have suffered a stroke, which means that parts of their brain literally die off, they are still able to regain control of most of their motor functions, and even their learning abilities still are high after the stroke. And I thought this was amazing. These are people who are in their 50s and 60s who are still able to do this. So for those of you who are in your 40s or 50s and you really feel that your brain just doesn't quite work as it used to, what I would challenge you to do is to learn more, right? Try to learn new skills, learn programming, learn a new language, learn a musical instrument. And you'll find that your brain will pick things up over time and it will get better. They say whatever you don't use, you lose, right? That comes muscle and that goes to your brain as well. And so if you've been not really challenging yourself the last couple of years, I highly recommend getting back into it. You'll find that your brain is just as capable as it used to be, but you're not using those same parts because maybe your belief system has just caused you to think that, it's too late for me, I can't do it. But once you switch over and you start challenging yourself, you'll find that your brain lights up and you get really excited about it. So with all that being said, I'm going to make it very clear that I don't think there's any limitations on you once you get 30 years old. I don't think some magical thing happens where all of a sudden people just look at you different. And I think this can actually be an asset to many of you who are above 30 if you want to make this career change. So if you enjoyed this video, guys, please go ahead and leave a like and also leave a comment below if you agree or disagree. By the way, if you are that person who is 100% committed to making this career change, so you want to shift careers and become a programmer, I highly recommend checking out my paid mentorship program. You can work with me one-on-one to get your career started. Now, if you're interested in the program, what I recommend you do is book a free career strategy session. To book that session, you can actually go down to the description. I'll give you a link in the description below. During that call, what we're going to do is I'm really going to ask you a lot of questions and try to figure out what your biggest sticking points are. What are the issues that are holding you back? I'm also going to work on figuring out the exact goals that you have. And from there, if the mentorship program is a good fit, I'll lay out what that looks like and you can go from there. So I highly recommend jumping on that call as soon as possible. Again, I'll leave a link in the description below. Other than that, thank you so much, as always, for watching.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Andy here. I'm a self-taught developer, and today I am so excited to share with you an interview I did with my best friend from high school. His name is Brian. Brian is a really smart guy. He's a software developer, and I asked him a lot of questions that you guys have been asking me in the comments. I feel like we covered a lot of topics that are sort of really relevant to people who want to become software developers. Interestingly enough, he and I became software developers at the very same time. He lived in New York at the time. We both happen to be following the path of software developers, just sort of by coincidence. So yeah, so interesting story. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments, and without further ado, let's go. Alright guys, this is Brian. Brian, say hello, say hi.
Everybody.
So Brian is my best friend from high school, and as I mentioned previously, Brian and I learned how to code sort of simultaneously at the same time. Which was, how did we find out about that? That was sort of random. Like I remember we talking one time, and I was like, "Oh, you're learning how to code." And like, "Oh, I am too."
Yeah, that's how I remember it. It's like it's been a while since we caught up, and then that's what you're doing. You're talking about this programming adventure, and you finish your story. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. It's like the exact same thing I've been up to.
Yeah, we didn't plan it. It was total coincidence. So that was kind of that was a cool period of my life. Was learning code along with you. And I would say we definitely had different experiences. Like for example, you went to a coding boot camp. Is that correct?
That's right.
Oh, cool. So before we get into that, because I know there's a lot of people who ask me a lot of questions specifically about boot camps. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself, just basic information, so people kind of know where you're coming from?
Yeah. So, as Andy said, my name is Brian, and currently out in Seattle, Washington. I'm working for a startup, or kind of like emerging from startup status, a company called Hearsay Systems, and it's a software as a service marketing platform for people in the finance industry. But yeah, I've been out in Seattle just for about 8 months, and yeah, as Andy mentioned, we started moving toward a kind of this programming career around the same time, so it was about 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, that's what we're up to now. I'm mostly front-end engineer.
Front-end engineer. Okay. What front-end stack do you work on typically? Are you React JS?
So currently, probably about 80% of what I'm doing is React. There's also some backbone parts of it are still around, along with jQuery, some experiments in Angular 2/4/6/8 or whatever number they're on now.
Right.
So it's kind of a little bit of everything in terms of front-end frameworks, and then doing a little bit of backend, which is all Python.
Okay.
Um,
Good stuff. Well, I want to ask you, what is your story becoming a software developer? So and I specifically need, when did you decide you were like, I'm working a job right now that wasn't software developer, right? And then you suddenly thought, well, I want to become one. So you did a boot camp, but just sort of maybe elaborate on how that started. So,
Yeah, definitely. So for me, it goes back, it's pretty far, probably about 2013, maybe even 12, 13 when I first started thinking about making the transition. So up until when I started programming full time, I've been doing mostly like nonprofit and government jobs. And a big part of all of those jobs have been Excel. So I was doing tons of Excel, cleaning up spreadsheets and data, even a little bit of like Access, like database kind of things.
Microsoft Access?
Microsoft Access, correct. Yeah. So I guess for folks who don't know, it's a pretty like basic like visual database application. Um, and and my brother, who's actually a programmer, I've been talking to him about all this stuff, and he's like, "Hey man, you should really think about programming because a lot of what you're doing, I feel like you could be doing it faster or better if you would learn programming." And so, taking his advice, I started looking into Python because that's what it seemed like a lot of people were using for kind of the data cleaning and analysis that I was doing. So I started really basic, with Python, but trying to automate some of the tasks that I've been doing. And after a while, I got to the point where tasks that used to take me anywhere from like 1 to 2 or 3 weeks were now getting done in a day or an afternoon, just because I had this Python pipeline set up to handle it. And so that was like around 2013, and that was about the time I decided to like really, kind of like dedicate my time to making the transition into programming full time.
And so at that point, did you decide to take a boot camp? How did that process go?
So yeah, I decided to do a boot camp, and General Assembly is one that I went to in New York. And part of the process of doing that, so like with this adventure of learning Python, it was going pretty well because I had something really specific to apply to, like these tasks at work that I wanted to speed up or automate. But when it came down to just like learning how to make websites and how to make like more complex applications, I had a really hard time just figuring out where to start. So honestly, it took me probably about a year and a half of like stopping and starting programming, like learning on my own, before I decided like I just need to jump into this head first. Dedicate this, 8 hours a day instead of like maybe 1 or 2 hours in the evening after work.
Yeah.
In signing up for the bootcamp, it wasn't that I didn't think I could do it without the bootcamp, but I was really having trouble finding the motivation to dedicate enough hours to actually make it a serious career transition.
Yeah, because it's funny. I've known you for a very long time. You are a tinkerer, and you love tinkering with different things. And I would always assume that you could just teach yourself programming if you were decided. The problem for you and everyone else, who wants to become a programmer is just the resource of time. And you have to be immersed in it every day to sort of really make big strides. I think I definitely for a period of time would spend the 1 hour a night during the weekdays and then I had to fully immerse myself because I'm not going to work on coding.
For me, I like to tinker, like kind of catches my interest. I would just sort of follow that thread and keep following it until I feel like I've learned enough, or maybe it's getting too deep for me to really understand.
Yeah.
Which makes it really hard to learn something like programming without any guidance, because I'll get started on this one path, run into some error, just also like what should I be doing?
Yes. My YouTube comments are just full of people like, what should I be learning? And I remember that.
Yeah. So it was it was a big decision to sign up for the boot camp. It was not cheap at the time that I signed up for it. I was living in New York, paying New York rent, and the boot camp was about $15,000 I think for 3 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so that's like money that I barely had, for a career transition, it seemed like anything like a sure bet.
You're sort of taking a leap of faith that boot camp will work, right?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I guess this is probably a great point to put in a plug for all the people in my life who helped me make that transition.
Absolutely.
So I tried to save up as much money as I could, but I knew that it wasn't going to be possible without the help of friends and family. Just kind of even support for rent or a place to stay, and even just emotional support. But that's for me really important in being able to make the transition successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that one thing that a lot of people would definitely be curious about is boot camp specifically. I'm sure you could probably go on for days and days about different aspects of boot camp that's helpful, but how does a boot camp, specifically the one with boot camp, teach you the skills that you needed to become a software developer?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I think, two main skills that the one that I went to taught. So one was like kind of first and foremost in specific technologies. So it was JavaScript and Ruby at the time, and so the way that General Assembly did it at the time is they would talk with professionals and recruiters and ask, like, what are you looking for? You have this many recs open. So are you looking for JavaScript, Python, Ruby, are you looking for Rails, or whatever it might be? So they kind of do the work of taking the temperature of the industry and figuring out, what they should be teaching new students. And so for me, kind of before, that was really helpful, like the what should I do? And so at the time it was Ruby and Rails and JavaScript, mostly backend. And so we went and we kind of did a high-level overview of those technologies and a number of other ones too. So that's kind of like the first thing, is that they already tell you the things that you should be studying, and they take that work, I guess, off your plate, and I guess that uncertainty. And then the second thing is they teach you how to find answers for yourself.
That's huge.
That's, yeah, which is like the biggest part of programming is finding answers.
AKA Googling everything.
Yes, and then usually the top result in Google is Stack Overflow. And so yeah, from Google to Stack Overflow and back. But basically, yeah, how to search for the right things to fix the problem that you're facing now. And one one thing that they told us a lot was that, you know, like programming in general, like it sounds maybe like it's specific, but really it's this huge wide field with a lot of different areas. And like they compared it's like a wood floor or something like that. And said, we're going to teach you one plank in this wood floor. And then, you know, putting it all together is going to be sort of like the challenge or the adventure that starts after the 3-month boot camp.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I find that when people do ask me, what should I be doing, for example, they're like, oh, I want to become this type of developer, what should I be doing? And I'm like, if you just started, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, to me, personally, if you just learn something that's simple and easy, something like Python and JavaScript, you're going to learn the fundamentals of programming. It's really the fundamentals of programming are basically the same throughout the programming language stack, with a few exceptions, certain absolutely fine. Like C++, I never got into. My friends recommended it as sort of a nightmare for newbies. But once you learn that, then you have a good foundation of programming principles, and then it seems like you kind of go figure out where you want to go. But at the end of the day, software development is not one thing. It's not monolith, certainly it's not monolith. It's such a wide open field. You can do anything from machine learning to, I guess some would even consider some graphic design in software programming, because some designers do know JavaScript. So yeah, it's just interesting to hear you say.
Definitely, and I think I also want to mention here, especially, you know, kind of like watching your video, and I guess, you know, sort of like know most of your story, but seeing it in condensed form in your video. But one of the things that you talked about was DeVry, and whether it was, I guess, maybe like quote unquote worth it to go, or, you know, would you do it the same way again? And for like my boot camp experience, I don't think I would do it the same way. If I were to go back in time and do this all over again. It's a really expensive way to get into the field, especially when a lot of the knowledge is just out there for free. And I think increasingly, like the free resources out there doing a better job of like staging the material, like telling you what you should focus on first and second and then third, and kind of like how to help yourself. And so I think what I'm most grateful for is that it gave me that kick in the pants to just go ahead and do it. Almost like one of those diets, like where like you give your friend, you know, $100 if you don't hit your goal, you just like keep doing that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it starts to feel expensive and costly. And so that's what the boot camp was for me. But honestly, like the material that was presented, the way that it was presented, the level of support for job searching and things like that. I don't necessarily feel like it was like I would do that again the same way next time. But again, I'm a working, you know, gainfully employed developer now, so
Right.
it ended up working out.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, because I wish I had just dropped out and I got a job. My first job, it was like 7 months after I started, I got the first job, and then I took another almost 2 years before I got my degree. I just wish I dropped out. Since I didn't need at that point, I put that time to give me a bonus for finishing. But I don't know, I didn't, my second job I got, they didn't care what I do, it's really like. So, but it's easy in hindsight to say that. It's harder if you're out there right now. I just want that validation of you who can do it. I would blame anyone for it. It's a personal choice. Wouldn't want to, you know.
100%. And if you're struggling like I was to find focus and motivation, and in my case, you know, it was a year and a half of trying to teach myself, you know, just like on nights and the weekends, and it just wasn't working. So, you know, for me, you know, like, you know, again, hindsight, all that, but yeah, it was the right thing at the right time.
Absolutely.
That's confident.
Absolutely. So once you went through the boot camp, how did you find your first job?
So finding my first job was an adventure and stressful. I finished the boot camp in the fall, around September, October, something like that. And it was probably September. And then I spent a solid 2 months just searching day in, day out. Putting together dozens of applications, tracking it all in spreadsheets, all of that good stuff. And what ended up being like most helpful in my job search was finding a way to get in front of people, just like face to face and in person. So a lot of times that'd be informational interviews. So I see a job that I like at a company that looks really interesting, and then just to reach out to somebody there, and generally like higher than would be appropriate normally. Find somebody like on GitHub who've got interesting projects. Say like, hey, I see that or this is what I was doing. Like, hey, I see that you're working here, and this job sounds really interesting. I'm pretty new to the field, but I see you're using these technologies that I'm interested in. Would you be open to talking on the phone or something like that, or meet up for drinks? So that actually ended up being really helpful. And because I felt like a lot of my applications were just going off in the ether.
Absolutely.
I'd submit it and then nothing would happen. I heard back from one company, it was a no, like 12 months after I applied. Being able to get in front of people, I was able to talk to them directly. They could see that I was passionate about it. They could ask me questions, and it was very like low stress, low pressure. They didn't feel like they had to do anything. In fact, like most people, if you ask them for help, they're kind of flattered that you reached out to them. So don't be afraid to just ask for informational interviews, for phone calls, what have you. I found that to be super helpful and directly led to the couple of interviews that I did get. That first job, it was actually an email intro that was forwarded to me by somebody else I'd done an informational interview with. He knew that his friend's company was hiring. And so I did another one of those informational interviews. We had a really great conversation, and then that led to them offering me basically a 1 week trial, come and hack on a project, see how it goes. And it was paid, which was awesome. And so hacked on the project for about a week. I liked them, they liked me, and then they made an offer.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great story. It's different from mine, but it's cool to hear someone go outside the box to find that first job. I think that at the end of the day, people not overvalue, but they overestimate their technical abilities. So in other words, they're so worried about making sure they're technically capable. Once you pass a certain threshold, you're technically capable, then you have to worry about how do you get that first job. And that's, to me, as difficult as learning the program in the sense of you're going to have to think different. You can't just, if you're going to put your resume out there, you're competing with people who are already developers. You can't. They're going to look at your thing, your resume, and say, no experience at that. It's interesting. And I would say one other thing, little known secret, and this is why I should talk about my channel in the future. At least what I have seen in the technology field, the recruitment process of finding talent is one of the most inefficient things I've ever seen. There are so many tech companies looking for good quality employees, and I've seen at 2 companies now, without airing their dirty laundry, they've wasted a lot of money hiring people who didn't work out. So for them, my point is this: for them to have someone like you come up and say, "Hey, what's going on? I like your code. I want to ask a few questions about your beer." They get to know you, and then they see how you are, and they try you out for a week. See one thing is big, thing is passionate, you're detail oriented, and you're willing to learn. My gosh, and you say that company possibly tens of thousands of dollars, they didn't have to do it. You're great. So I just feel like people should be very confident in the approach that you suggested, because that's going to be good for employers, it's going to be good for you. There's an opening there that I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% spot on. That the recruitment process for tech jobs is so broken and inefficient. People spend a lot of time like staring at resumes and seeing how well it lines up with this like fantasy job description that they posted online for somebody with 8 years of experience in the exact technology they think they need at that moment. When in reality, probably what they want is somebody who is passionate, who is coachable, who is willing to make mistakes and learn from them. And ultimately for a lot of places, like somebody they want to hang out with. And they can't figure most of that out, but they're actually getting to know you. So it's yeah, sometimes it's nice just to be able to help the companies get around their inefficiencies by just like finding a way to get to meet somebody in person.
Yeah, I agree. That's for sure. Really important question that, man, I know I thought about a lot when I was learning this. How do you overcome the imposter syndrome? Which for anyone who's watching this, basically, how do you overcome the feeling that you are, I don't know how to say this, that you're completely inadequate, that you are a terrible developer, and this feeling lingers on when you get your first job. You're like, you're sitting there, you're so you get hired by a company, and all the people around you are decent skilled, but you feel like you have no skills, and your head's really barely treading water. That might not be a great explanation, but I think most people know what imposter syndrome is. But how did you feel that you overcame it as you progressed?
Oh man, I wish I could tell you that the imposter syndrome, but it's kind of like a phobia, is an irrational fear. The imposter syndrome is it's like not that it's irrational, but I think the magnitude of sort of like the uncertainty and the anxiety of being inadequate is like not in proportion to reality. So it's like, yeah, it's not that the fear isn't rooted in anything. You know, of course there are things that, you know, that I don't know and that most developers don't know. Of course there are ways that we're doing things wrong, you know, but I feel like the heart of imposter syndrome is just sort of like this chronic sense of not belonging, which can lead to just like anxiety, to not doing as much as you're really capable of at work, because you're so afraid of the consequences of being exposed for being, you know, a bad developer if you were to put some work out there and it gets scrutinized. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of it can be a kind of debilitating, um, you know, affliction, but I'd say there's definitely ways to manage it for sure. So that first job, the company that hired me, the CEO, he's in the CEO and CTO role. Just an absolutely brilliant man, and his work was like just flawless in general. I learned a lot from him, but like my meager output and and the quality was just not the same in comparison to just how much he's putting out and how good it was. Led to this everyday sense of almost like dreading going to work. Like I'm going to contribute like my like 20 cents to his $50, you know, like every day. But you know, like while I was putting myself through like mental and emotional torture about this, I was actually learning and absorbing so much through the process and getting better and better and better. But I never felt like that, and in the end, like I ended up kind of sabotaging myself in that role because I never really felt adequate. So it's yeah, just kind of part of programming story. I ended up getting laid off about 3 months after I landed that job. I think in large part because of just like the anxiety and how much stress I was feeling about not being adequate. So I really had to just do a reset, you know, just on my whole mindset. Um, and what that looked like was kind of like reconnecting with like friends and mentors and you know, asking for just kind of like objective evaluations of my work. And actually, kind of the most important thing is just continuing to code. Because like the more that I would code, the more feedback I get, the better I get, and like good and bad. And so it kind of took me a while of you know just kind of really focusing back to basics again, and before I felt like really confident in programming. But I don't know. I'd say, and then also looking back on it, just realizing like how much of myself it was, and giving myself that feeling. Like I don't think the company gave me any reason to feel as bad as I did, and so much of that negative feedback cycle was in my own head. And I think really taking some time to reflect on that. It took like about a month or two, but you know, kind of rebuilt confidence to get out, like apply, find the next gig, and happy to say like I came out swinging with that next gig, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny how there's really no, it seems as if there's no magic pill for the imposter syndrome. Just tell me the one nice trick to get over it, but it's just essentially just living with it and figuring out how to do it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I've been doing it for a number of years now. The funny thing about being experienced is you start, increasing the level of competition too. Like you get a promotion, and now the people around you are like even better again. And so there's always going to be somebody to compare yourself to, and some reason to think that you're inadequate or deficient. But honestly, yeah, it's just about just continuing to work. Just put out work, submit something that you think maybe is half done or it's wrong. People will tell you what's wrong with it. They'll also tell you what you did right. The imposter syndrome sticks around, but I say number one piece of advice is do not let it lead to paralysis.
Yes.
Just keep moving, keep moving.
Yeah, and you should definitely, I think one of the things I was lucky to have, personally, I wasn't was I had, in my first job, I had a supportive group of developers. So, and I was always asking questions. I was almost, it was so probably annoying, to the point of annoyance, where I would ask them questions about everything. And I thought it was maybe a little bit annoying, but they were like, this guy really cares. And I think they were willing to accept whatever they be over low quality work because they saw in me that I cared. And that goes a long way in helping people to support you and give you good feedback, which is why I didn't have crippling anxiety when I first started at my first job. So, yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah.
Why do you think it took you so long to get into programming? Because if you think about it, your personality is very much a programmer. That's I'm just showing you how you think. It took you till you're almost 30, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, what took you so long? Why not do it early?
Yeah, and actually, just even have a little bit more background into that. So, I first started programming in middle school, like TI-83, graphic calculator game.
Oh my god, I remember this. I'm not gonna hear you dirty laundry, but I do remember this.
Yeah, and like being like from this GeoCities website, so I did like a little bit of programming in middle school and kind of like the beginning part of high school. And I mean, it's kind of crazy, but like the main reason why I sort of like dropped not just programming, but even like most of my interests in like math and science was like one job shadowing day. And I don't know if you know this story actually, so I was into programming, like a little bit experimenting, and my parents sent me to work with a friend of theirs who was working at Lucent Technologies, which is actually like a really amazing research lab in Illinois. So it was pretty cool to be able to get together, like as a high schooler, but just seeing the day to day, I mean, I just couldn't believe like what the life of a programmer actually looked like. So just a really quick illustration. So I guess back in the days, how you would program is you would write some code, like on the terminal, and then you would put it on a disk, and then you would walk it over to the server room, and then you load it from the disk onto the server runs it, it breaks, and it tells you what lines of code broke, then you take that back down the hallway to your terminal, where you locate those lines of code, and then you try to fix them. And so I was watching, he's brilliant, he's awesome. But I was watching his day to day, which is, fix a line, walk down the hallway to the mainframe, it breaks, walk it back down the hallway. I was like, I cannot do this. So this is the life of a programmer or a scientist, and this is just totally not for me. And I ended up doing it on just a really different track, like liberal arts and sciences.
But that makes me feel a lot better about, well, it makes me feel worse because every day I get really mad that my project takes a long time to load. And rebuild it in Visual Studio. So it takes a long time to compile. It takes like, 20 seconds and I get really mad. So it makes me feel better. I should not take my situation for granted.
Definitely, yeah. And so, looking back, it's kind of like a funny story. It's like, man, this one day, like, kind of changed the course of my life in a weird way. But what's, I think, funniest about it is just how, like, wrong of a perception of the whole career and field I got, like, from that one experience. And I guess just by way of explanation, like, that seemed like a really drab kind of job or day-to-day experience, but like he was really excited about it, because like he actually had a connection to the end product, and like what he was trying to build. And I kind of saw it for the first time when my brother was like trying to get me into using Python to do my job better. And it's like, okay, like I see you older and like this little bit of code is gonna save so much time. So like you keep practice and making it work. And then yeah, there's like an error and it tells you like, oh, something like syntax error lines up, so I fix that. And then another one with that. Keep coming through. There's like that connection to the end goal, the end product. And I was really just sort of like missing that in my perception and in high school. But yeah, I think, like even, right now, not gonna lie, like I love say systems, but, I never saw myself making, like software as a service for financial professionals. But the problems are really interesting. The tech is complex, and so like my little bit of code feels fun, and that it builds toward like this collective goal. And it's all very collaborative, like with product, with design, with like the sales team, like customer support. I'm not alone working on code. I'm working on these like teams, these interactive teams, and diverse teams toward a shared goal. So yeah, it's nothing at all what I imagined.
Yeah, things have definitely changed in high school. I'm sure that was more of the norm as a program, but even within about 5 years from that time, we started to change. It's interesting.
Absolutely.
All right, so another question: what is the most rewarding part of programming?
Yeah, for me, the most rewarding part kind of gets into what I was talking about with kind of like my misconceptions about what programming is. And yeah, strangely enough, my favorite parts of programming are and then we all turn this idea into an actual feature that people are going to use, and hopefully they love it and they're excited for us to pay for it. And that's kind of like what makes the whole thing work. But yeah, that collaborative process, like I found so enjoyable. And in reality, most of my day isn't programming. Most of my day is like figuring out what it is that people actually want me to do. And I'm probably doing that for maybe like 30-40% of my day. And then the other 60% is actually at the keyboard and writing code. And so that collaborative piece I find super, I guess just what's the word, like inspiring or motivating. And then so like part of my brain where I love diving into a problem, then I just go into it, just kind of in a zone and coding. And so we kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you wouldn't want to do all one or all the other.
No, definitely not. If my day was 100% instead of, in a coordinating these teams, then I don't think I enjoy that as much either. And so with programming, I get the best of both worlds. I get to dive into problems really deeply, but then I get to come back out and be social, be collaborative. And it's that mix that I really like.
Yeah, I'm definitely like it's definitely like multiple parts for sure. What would you say are your least favorite parts or the least rewarding parts of coding a program?
Oh boy. Yeah, least favorite parts are definitely those times when it gets to be tedious. And that happens. Sometimes you're working on something and it seems like nothing that like I do is right. I'll be working on a problem, working and it's like error, or like maybe there aren't any errors. And it's working, but it's not working. And so like where do I go to figure out why this thing isn't working? And typically that gets to be the hardest when I've been working at a problem for a long time and haven't taken a break. So sometimes the best thing to do is just walk away from it, come back to it the next day. But those moments when they happen it's just so frustrating for a machine to tell you no in so many different ways over and over.
And yet at some point you start not trusting the machine. Like, there's got to be something wrong with the machine, but it's like, no, it's Because code typically doesn't malfunction, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's usually the programmer.
Yeah, there's some old saying that I'm probably gonna get wrong, but like the problem is between the chair and the keyboard. Or
Yes, it's PEPCAT.
yeah.
Problem probably exists between computer and chair, I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Basically, the problem is me. Like that's
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you a question that's kind of random. What is some of the weirdest or worst advice you've heard out there for aspiring developers? Like, what is something that you've heard that's just like, oh, it's good?
Yeah, I think some of the bad advice. I'm not even sure if anybody told this to me specifically, but that you need to know everything.
Oh,
Like
God.
that at some point you'll have like that you'll know enough, and then like you'll be doing your job, and like that's it. And like that's just it's so not the case. Like there's no way to learn all of the things. And in fact, a lot of people get by and are really productive, knowing so much less than even I do, as being, like 2 years into this, but they're just in such a specific domain that they're really productive in that domain. So I just really try to learn everything. You don't have to know SQL, like, and Python, Ruby, and JavaScript, and HTML, and like all the CSS core pieces. Like, you don't have to know all of it to be ready to be working and to be productive.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Well, I'm gonna ask one last question and get you on out of here. I know you've got a busy rest of your Sunday. Last question is, what is your future goals in software development? Where are you looking for the future?
That's a good question. And I don't really have a good answer for that. I started out this career like wanting to do something that felt like more like rewarding than what I was doing before, and I've definitely hit that point. And right now, like I'm kind of like zeroed in on just becoming a better and better developer, which for me kind of means working with new and different tools. I started out Python with kind of like the data processing, and then moved into web technologies, and I've been doing like front-end web development for the last 2 years. At some point, I kind of moved back to the back end, and being able to stitch together a whole system so that it works together well. In terms of like specific goals, not so much more, but just continuing to learn more and more about the field, to ask for challenging assignments, and just keep diving into the different things.
Yeah, that's a good answer. It's like with software development, it's like the world is your oyster. You kind of choose whatever route you want. You're not stuck on this narrow path. Like if you're a doctor, there's not too many things that you can do. I mean, it's pretty well you say like, your path is only one of some things. With software development, it's like who knows what you could be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It could be drastically different.
Definitely, yeah. And then kind of like most of us out there, I have some dreams of startup ideas and app ideas that I've been like working on and not working on a few times. So
We all got it.
yeah. So launching one of those, I'll just say.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, hey man, thank you so much for coming on my channel. I know that just after this interview, that a lot of people are gonna love it with feedback. I think they're all gonna want to see their own YouTube channel, so you should definitely do that.
I don't know who wants to watch this on.
Never know. All right, well, thank you so much and have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Cecil. Good to see you, bud.
All right. Hey guys, what's up? So, today's video is all about JavaScript. It's a JavaScript environment. What do I mean by primary? It's where it's a obviously JavaScript. So it is where you define it, what other software development is. A lot of people ask questions about specific programming previous videos. So that's some kind of sort of overview of each programming language. If you're a person who watches this, somebody who's just starting out, that way I kind of guide you sort of just a little bit about what JavaScript does. let's just get right into it. What is JavaScript? Start with so JavaScript. Each website will serve up. So let's say it's a very basic website that serve up. Index.html page. Now, the index.html page is serving up basically HTML. HTML is this essentially means it's how the browser, it's like a skeleton. So it's how the browser is items, it's how the browser shows initial data, title, it's got a body paragraph, etc. So that HTML page is really limited because it can show static or change data. By itself, obviously that HTML page is a nice one. By itself, it's pretty limited. So say you wanted to grab information from certain, so you wanted to grab information from Twitter, so it's live tweets on the web. You can't do that in one HTML. That's what JavaScript can come in turn to a static website, static HTML site. JavaScript is actually able to manipulate what is you are looking at on the website, and able to access the HTML basically automatic sort of data that tells JavaScript what is happening on the page, website, but it gives it access to change those things. That information, that non-information, is available to what we know in API is other than sort of opening to control some of the information. That's something that we will probably more time. Beyond that, JavaScript has loads of exponential function. So for accessing Twitter, not only can you potentially access Twitter automatically, there you can also access a server that you are running where you can send us some information, you can send information back. Or to connect to Twitter or outside of Twitter. It can be the web server side, but JavaScript has that functionality to sort of access web services and process information. It's really valuable for my first time. Alright, so we know that JavaScript is used to help you is not limited to browser. So many places it seems like this massive JavaScript. First place that most people work with JavaScript may be familiar with is the web frameworks. Now, web frameworks built with JavaScript are so common nowadays that and sure, there are tons of JavaScript frameworks. You might have heard of Node.js, React.js, Backbone, Vue is another one that's fairly recent, and plenty more. The JavaScript framework essentially is a framework that helps people to help developers to build apps. It does a lot of what we call heavy lifting. Now, each framework is different, but essentially many of them cover some of these sort of things like routing, displaying different components of the app. That's something that can be very tedious, but that's some of the things we do. Another one is data services. So that can do backend servers, serializing information, being able to keep track of authentication, security tokens. A lot of these frameworks make that whole easier. You won't have to sort of roll or create a framework or little module functionality for it. Look, the topic of JavaScript frameworks is really so suffice to say that it's you're going to become a web developer, it's going to be something that you learn a lot about. It's going to should probably learn about. JavaScript is also available as a server-side language. Server-side functionality using JavaScript, so you have a potentially front-end JavaScript. Or that JavaScript is available as a database language. There are two different languages. MongoDB and TypeScript use JavaScript as their language. So you can have a higher stack from front to back. You want to create a mobile app potentially? Well, JavaScript actually allows you to do that as well. I've actually used it in the past to use Onyx, which is a framework that will allow you to create mobile apps using Angular, essentially. So let's take that and sort of create a mobile app with Android and iOS that is sort of like this, looks and feels like a mobile app. It's really rendered. Now, that's not the same as creating an iOS app in language, but it can be some substitute for mobile development. So you can obviously access. So it's definitely not the same as creating a mobile app, but it can definitely go. Lastly, you can actually create desktop apps in JavaScript and HTML, CSS, a framework called React. So you can create sort of full-fledged desktop app. Windows, essentially, all you have to do now is that JavaScript was used everywhere, so it's moved far beyond its humble versions of browser just to be sort of HTML. Right, so now you know a little bit about how JavaScript works, you know where it's used. Question number 2. It's a good question to ask. I am a huge fan of JavaScript from the perspective of a first programming. I created a video here that has many times. The basis of my reasoning for that is that JavaScript is so simple to get up. So if you want to go on this right now, all you need is a constant paper. And you just start messing around with JavaScript, all you need is a browser. Developer tools and start looking at it. Beyond that, there are JavaScript syntax language is pretty easy to get. So add those two reasons. It is not a perfect programming language, so that obviously works with it. And learn as you go. Obviously, happening with JavaScript, it's something that is the best. Which is my personal recommendation. The next question to ask is, what is a software language? JavaScript is surprisingly pretty polarizing language. It's so widely used and so massively adopted by tons of companies. JavaScript web frameworks that are using JavaScript as a server-side language, database efficiency. So people have really bought into JavaScript, but there's no doubt, so there's no doubt that there's an application because, well, let's put it this way. If you've been programming JavaScript for any amount of time, you will encounter some of the most frustrating things from all the way from naming, so capitalization issues, so say name a variable Andy. I work also with C#. Sort of errors and syntax. cover some common questions. Java and JavaScript. Java and JavaScript are not the same. Despite being JavaScript is actually syntax was based on Java, which not a JavaScript certification is obviously important. Despite the namesake and despite I guess the syntax, they are absolutely the same. Not do I need to know what HTML and CSS before I start? The short answer would be no. Long answer is yes. Because JavaScript can be run by something. JavaScript is common representation in CSS. Very common with JavaScript developers so definitely you should learn. But one of the mistakes I sort of get a sense that people make clearly more than JavaScript is that they have to master CSS. My recommendation is always this. Learn the basics and the fundamentals of HTML and CSS to be able to do a few things. Once you pick up HTML and CSS, then you want JavaScript. Do not need to become a master that is potentially get a good path. So don't break the back. I mean, definitely learn. Next question. While in JavaScript, what should I do? That is a question for a whole other video. I really ain't breaking down two steps. I learned JavaScript by reading my first JavaScript book. That's my recommendation. Other than that, I would say first learn JavaScript. First book. Once you've sort of gotten a good grasp of JavaScript, soon you better you're going to want to build a complex application. Complex and challenging for you, not so complex. But you're going to build an app that challenges your skills that you can use for your so once you build an app using JavaScript, that is probably a good time to learn a web framework. It doesn't really matter just pick one popular ones, I'd say, and then build another app in that. Once you're there, then it's probably a good time to sort of evaluate your skills, talk to other some sort of mentor in the field, stay in the field, sense of approach. Once you've done all that, you've done a pretty good job. One more note too, just real quick about the if you are going to be a highly recommend don't be that person who's too good to I recommend that book all the time. Subscribe below here. Bell icon. Other than that, thanks so much for watching. All right, hi, hello there. I'm Andy, self-taught software developer. It's about JavaScript types. So I taught myself short as it worked, I have a full-fledged Tetris app. I have a Tetris app that I built, and I'm going to go over that with you. Now, this video is definitely recommended for beginners. If you're intermediate or advanced, so it's true, it's not. It's for dramatic code. So we're just going to go over it and maybe give any of those beginners out there a sense of how to go about it. And at the end, I'll try to give you a takeaway. So what is a what you should be thinking about when you go to this first one encounter. Very sort of a experiment. Okay. So anyways, that's screen sharing software. Go check out this. So first things first, we link to my GitHub description below, but it's easy for it. Boom, right there, right? It's file system, so from the six, just go ahead and zip that, and we'll have all the files that you will use from this application. Now, keep in mind, you want to go ahead and start playing off of that. You're going to open up that HTML file, but I do not want you to open that file in any browser like Firefox. The reason is because I wrote this app like 4 years ago, and some of the browsers have changed how they allow images to be placed on the HTML canvas. Long story short, all you need to know is that you want to write down this HTML, you got to open Firefox. Oh yeah, there you go. That's action right there, huh? Look at that. So yeah, it's a Tetris game, and you know what? It's pretty cool. It works. I'll show you how. Oh, that's bad. Oh, wait, no. Look at that. I scored. I should have scored that. The scoring system may be off. But hey, look, it kind of works. I just scored 100 points. I just scored 200 points now. Now, you can see it definitely works. Now, there are a few bugs in this bad boy. This program here. I'm trying to show you the site. A little secret, you can get tested and stuff like that. But long story short, that's my app. That's the whole thing. So I'm assuming you're a beginner and you just kind of want to get something up. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So these two files and directories, all of your have a Tetris app. It's really not that complicated. You've got index.html file, which is going to open up in your browser. And that's basically going to tell the web page what's going to look like. You have a CSS page, it's basically used for styling. This is not. And then your JavaScript page. Everything on the JavaScript page is basically the engine that runs the app. It's going to control how the scoring is done. It's going to even really control how the game's played. It's going to control how the game screen looks. Obviously, you get that set here. But the other thing you might want to know is that in the images file, so in the images directory, you have all of the game pieces. Now, these game pieces are highly technically determined to show you they're called heterogeneous. So these heterogeneous here, you can see that there's a picture of each one, but not only that, there's each possible position that they could possibly be in. And probably don't even know that, but it might make more sense. But so let's look at the index.html first. Now, there's not really much you have to look at here. I would say just focus on two things. We'll focus on the body of the page here. There's an on-down event. It's calling a JavaScript function called scope. This is going to track any key presses on the page, but we'll get into that in a second. Now, the other thing I would say to take a look at is the game screen div right here. And that's basically going to contain the right? Game screen. So really it's just a HTML canvas. And if you don't know what HTML canvas, basically what that is, it's a sort of screen that you create that you can manipulate or draw on. So this is probably putting it through JavaScript. So as you guess, that's going to be your screen. So aren't good yet. Alright, so now we're looking at a JavaScript that is going to run our program. Now there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a little bit confusing, even to me when I first looked at it. I just had a couple of this, but when I first looked at it, the thing I think about is the box. And you don't need to really pick it up very quickly. It's not well written. My first time I ever wrote it. It's really more modularized. Really big into code, and that basically means that I want people to look at my code and very quickly pick up what's going on, how it's organized, how it's made. In this case, it's not made very well. There's abbreviations, variables. It's not very important. The important thing is a few things. One is up here at the very top, you can see all this stuff. This is basically the iteration setup of the game. FPS stands for frames per second. This is how that's used. And then ITR stands for iteration. What iteration means is basically what iteration the game outputs. So every Tetramino that's going to be played, so if you know the main Tetramino top down, put on the bottom, well, that's an iteration. So for every new Tetramino piece of that's another iteration. That's really all you need to see from this. It's a lot of information, but we're going to just do a high level view. If you really want to see where the magic happens, remember line 178. Line 178, there's a variable called game start. It's called it second. Start. First one is what function that you want to run. And the second argument is how often you want to run that function. So basically a native JavaScript function that will run anything you want to for as long as you want to call it stop, it will run it in a certain interval. So run it 1 second, 10 seconds, 15 seconds until you call it stop. This is really important to me because this is a way for me to basically have the game run, right? So we have a call function every single time. In this case, you can see here it's calling update basic. So really everything here is going to happen in line 178. And that's going to call the main function. Now, the reason I showed that in the variable just so that you know, I eventually was going to call, it's going to stop you set middle. So, yeah. Now, the update game state is going to do some very simple stuff, and it's going to be very complicated. All we're going to do is draw a canvas. We're going to draw a basically picture of the canvas. In this case, the very first iteration of the black canvas. We'll then copy that canvas into memory. So let's say state, I want to see that canvas and save it in memory for a variable. And then the tetra position, tetra when it's a variable based on the current tetra. Current tetra unit on the page. Current tetra unit. We're going to take that y position on the page, x and y position, y is up and down by the way. It's going to add 12 to that y position. So anything that adds 12 is like 0 to the top, then add 12 sort of pixels to the top. Move x is going to detect whether any keys were pressed. And it's going to move it left or right accordingly, or it's going to rotate it, or drop down over the top. Draw tetra, it's actually going to draw the tetramino on the page. So Tetramino is not on there until we draw it, so it's going to draw based on those. And then, of course, the detect lid, the most complicated part of that, is going to try to detect whether the current Tetramino is touching the inner pieces, whether it's touching any bounds, left or right. And I'm not going to get into that in this video. Maybe that's just a little complicated. Alright, so now we're going to be looking at that. We're going to walk through it line by line as the JavaScript is running. So as you can see on my screen here, I've got the app open and sort of pause and pause state. We'll do that by opening up the developer. Press F12 and open up developer tools on Firefox. By going over to the debugger tag and opening the JS JavaScript page, we're going to actually be able to put a breakpoint and line code you want when that line of code is hit and it freezes. I'm just going to show you sort of a visual of what's going on. Let's actually step through this. So Tetramino is about to hit another. It's about one, I guess you would call, it's about one interval away from touching the next one. So let's actually see this in action. So I'm going to go ahead and step over the draw canvas. Now, one thing you'll notice is that when I draw the canvas, I'm touching the next one. The reason this is noticed that if I didn't sort of overwrite the text window with a blank screen, then update it, it looked very weird. It almost looked like it was dragging sort of, how do you say it? The motion looked very weird. So I actually blanked out the text window. Then I took a copy of the canvas of this current state that you can see here, copy of it, stored it, and some canceling it going on. Then we're going to update the text window, the current text window Y position. So 12 pixels down. So we're going to detect any keystrokes and step over that. Now the most important part, we're going to draw the text window based on the new position, the X or Y position. We're going to draw that. So, oh, look, there you go. Now, this is where the use of the meat of the application is the most complicated stuff. It's going to call detect collision, which is going to do a bunch of checks to see if you're touching anything. In this case, we can see that the bottom part of this text window this text window is touching another one, so it will actually do its job and start. So that's basically it. Now, the takeaway is, okay, you've got this drawing, it's a little more complicated than that, but you can, honestly, highly recommend scale of the code, try to figure out, it's a little bit more than what's going on, but this is the core gap. And the reason this is so important, and the thing that I sort of hinted at when I started was, anytime you want to do something, anytime you want to create an application that's a little bit more complicated, you comfortable with, you just need to start with sort of an idea of what you want to start with a big shot, right? Let's say you want to build a JavaScript app. You don't know where to start. Well, keep the big picture in mind if that's what you want, but then small chunk it for those steps. Say, you know what? I'm going to use a screen background of a drawing. I'm going to draw the needle on there. I'm going to detect any X or Y position changes, and then I'm going to draw that text needle on there. And then I'm going to see if it's touching anything, and it's not. I reset it. Like the way that I built this app is I just took it one step at a time. Literally the first thing I did, it took so long, it's just really funny to think about this. The information is easily and readily available. Is just to draw a text needle on the page, and then draw it a little bit lower, and then draw it a little bit lower, and then draw it a little bit lower, and then draw it a little bit lower. And then once I could do that, then I also have to figure out how do I then stop it at the bottom? How do I tap whether the bottom of the text needle has touched the bottom of the page? And not to mention the fact that there's 4 or 5 different text needles. 4 or 5 different text needles, they all have different shapes and sizes. It's like I just took it one step at a time. I didn't worry about all of it at once. I just figured out how many draw text needles page and how many. Once you do that, then you can start to think about bigger stuff. But don't try to jump ahead and think like, oh man, I got to do this like that. I was snoring now, you know where to start. Like, yeah. Start at the beginning. How do you draw image? Start with there, then you take it a little bit back. So, okay, I don't know. I feel like I'm just going on and on. I'm really not too great at these tutorials. What do you think? You like the video? I'm waiting for my text to be really good. Right? Master? I swear I've got 700. Other than that, thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe below, click the bell if you enjoyed the video. For the awesome video on software development. But I don't know. Thanks so much for watching and Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Andy. I'm a self-taught software developer, and in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about how to smash through imposter syndrome, right? You know, the anxiety and all those negative feelings and resistance that you feel when you are looking to get your first software development job. You kind of feel like you're an imposter, that everyone around you knows what they're doing, and you're like, what are you doing? You have no idea what you're doing, that you're a fraud, you're a fake, and it's like, why even try? So, as you guys know, I'm not one of those people who's like just going to give you that one little weird trick, like pinch your ear and hold your breath and think your thoughts and somehow imposter syndrome. So I'll break down what exactly imposter syndrome is, where I see most people really get fucked up by imposter syndrome, and then we'll talk about a real strategy for overcoming it and help you in the future, not wasting all of your time. So first things first, let's talk about imposter syndrome. So I work with a lot of people right now, like a lot of people
YouTube channel, Facebook, and my mentorship program. And I see so many people who waste so much time. Once they get to the point where they're ready, where they've met those threshold skills, right? So typically what I'm talking about is once somebody has spent enough time and they've created a portfolio of applications, right? They create a portfolio of applications that showcase the skills that they will need for their first job. And if they've completed that, then the next step is to go and get a job, right? And you think that would be the obvious next step. But what I see is, I see a lot of people who don't even know, or sometimes they do know that they are a little bit scared. They're a little bit scared. They're still an imposter, right? They feel like they're a fraud. And so what they do is, instead of going on the job market after 6 months or a year after they've met their threshold, what they do is they start backwards rationalizing not to do it because they're actually scared. So you'll see them spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months shoring up their skills. I've got to shore up this skill. I've got to shore up my English skill. I've got to shore up my whatever coding paradigm or JavaScript framework or library or new programming language. They got to shore it up because look, when you are a little bit scared, you're nervous, you don't feel ready, right? Because no one feels ready. Everyone feels like an imposter when you're beginning. But when you don't feel ready, what you're going to do is you're going to keep putting it off and putting it off. It's kind of like when you have, like when you have to do something important in your house and you see a load of laundry over there. You know what? That load of laundry is really important. I got to make sure I clean it up instead of doing the hard work. Whatever thing that has the highest priority in your life right now. So if you think about it, people who could be potentially ready within 6 months to a year may spend another 6 months to a year, again, showing up their skills, wasting time, wasting potential money, wasting just advancement in their career because they are just actually really scared of putting off the hard work, putting off and getting a job. So look, imposter syndrome is real. It is hard to overcome. There's no simple trick. A lot of the times that anybody who is waiting to feel like they're ready, and who's sitting there thinking to themselves one day they'll wake up, look out of bed and look around like, you know what, today's the day. It's not gonna happen. Sorry to say, I never quite feel ready. So, how to solve imposter syndrome once and for all. So what you want to think of it as this, okay? So again, key thing here is so as I mentioned, you should have your target should be a portfolio of applications. I can't tell you how many. I say anywhere from 2 to 6. That's just my general rule of thumb. It's not it's not a 100% you have to do that. But anywhere from 2 to 6 applications, the key is it should showcase the range of skills for the job positions that you're out there looking for, right? So if you're looking for front end, once you meet that threshold, it's really probably the best time to actually go out there and start applying for jobs, start the job process because I know for many of you guys you think, oh, wait, I'm not ready. I don't have the skills. And the truth is that at that point you can get the first job. Doesn't mean you're a developer, you just need to potentially get the first job. There are people who have been hired with a lot less skills than you have at that point when they've been creative in the job interview process and when they've been prepared. Right? So once you met the threshold, then you're going to go out and get a job. Here's the key. If you just go out there and you start applying for jobs, you're going to be nervous as hell. You're going to show up for your first couple of interviews just like, with that imposter syndrome. You're going to show up feeling like really nervous. You're going to show up and just be like, do I really belong here? And that's going to really ruin, that's going to lower their chances of getting hired because, look, to be honest with you, people want to hire junior developers who have confidence, who they don't feel like they're going to be holding their hand all the way through the process. Or even worse, they don't want to hire a junior developer who they're going to have to, prod to move forward. They want somebody who's going to come in, ask questions, be interactive with the team and the group, type of person they're looking for in job interviews, you just want to make sure that that's the way you're displaying. So now to my point here, right? So how is it that we get ourselves prepared and confident for the first job interview or that first couple job interviews that we get in the job? Here's the way I look at it, right? So once we've completed the threshold and completed all of our portfolio applications, what we're going to want to do is you want to treat the job hunting process like preparing for a boxing match. Okay, so the way it's pretty simple. It's like this: when boxers prepare for their matches, usually it's like what, a couple months out, 4 or 6 months out, they know they're going to fight. In that time period, in that 4 to 6 month time period, all they do is focus on the fight. Okay? They focus on training, getting their body ready. They focus on their mind, making sure their mind is ready. They spend 7 days a week preparing and resting and getting their bodies and minds ready for one sole purpose, which is to beat up somebody else, right, or to survive the fight with someone else. When they go through that long process, which is hard, right? That's a very difficult process. I've never done it. I don't imagine how difficult it is. Mentally, it's very mentally tough. Once you've gone through that process, then you are actually at the fight. And when boxers get to the fight, you can tell, like, look, they put months of preparation into this. There is no doubt in their mind that, like, look, there's nothing else they can do. There's no stone they left unturned. They have one focus when you go to the fight, which is to follow the game plan and just beat the other person up, like whatever it is to win. They keep their focus very narrow. They're not sitting there showing up to the fight going, am I really a boxer? Is this really, did I train hard enough? It's like, no, they know they train hard. So let's take this to you, how that's going to work for you. So when you met the threshold, what you want to do is you want to take that first couple weeks, maybe even a couple months. I would say anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, and just pick a date when you're going to start actually applying for jobs and going through your first interview. And in that interim, in that 2 weeks and 2 months, what you want to do is just prepare like a mofo. Like you just want to do everything you can do to prepare for the job interview process, because the job interview process is, in the technical world, it can be very specific. Right? Like, first of all, you just want to have good interviews. So, if you're social, if you are able to show your personality, and you may not have to work on this, but for some of you guys who are shy, who are a little more reserved, who have trouble talking about yourselves, you need to practice the interview, and you need to practice the interview in situations where you feel comfortable, because that will best simulate what a real job is like. So if you can do it with friends, if you can do it with mentors, and really learn things, if you can do it with people you don't know, if you can join my Facebook group, you can go there and you can shoot a video of yourself answering interview questions, whatever it is that makes you nervous, you need to simulate that same situation and practice the interview. Then there's there's technical questions that you have to answer and potential whiteboarding challenges you have to do. So I really put those and lump those together, but you have to practice answering technical questions. So again, if you're going for that front end goal, you have to make sure you have a broad spectrum of questions that you can answer with confidence, and you can always, and you should be able to talk about any of those questions based on your portfolio. You need to practice that again in the same way that you would when you actually go to the job interview. So you have to have that pressure on. So you can do it again with a mentor, with a friend, with somebody you don't know, with a stranger, inside of that Facebook group. You have to be able to do that the same with the programming challenges or whiteboarding aspect. Because look, the whiteboarding interview is tougher than you think. If you've never done it, it's tough to, and even I find it difficult now when the times I just do it for fun. It's just difficult to talk out loud in front of somebody who you don't know. Just like everyone else, guess what? I'm insecure about my coding skills sometimes too, and I don't want to sound dumb when I'm talking out loud, but what you realize is when you've done it a few times, when you've done the whiteboarding challenge in front of somebody you don't know, you do it for a few times, guess what? You get more comfortable with it. You realize that, look, really what they're looking for most of the time is for you to speak out loud and speak out how you're solving the problem. But of course, do they want you to solve the problem? Absolutely, and that's, you have to practice the coding challenge / whiteboarding challenges. You can tackle rank complete code for that. But don't forget the crucial aspect here is you have to do it under pressure. So again, if you can use a screen sharing program to actually film yourself doing some sort of whiteboarding challenge, you can do it in Facebook. You can do it. You can find a coding mentor and do it in front of them. And really get some feedback about how you went about solving the problem, or if you did solve a problem, what you did wrong. So basically, you want to spend those 2 weeks to 2 months preparing like it's a boxing match. You just want to spend all of your time and resources towards that one aim. So that way, when you show up for your first interview, you really prepared, you really spent the time, like cut out, most of your leisure time that you have. More than likely, you have enough leisure time in your life. Okay, you can spend 2 weeks to 2 months to change your entire career in your life to get your first job. Okay? Just do it, right? Like, just really spend the time, make your boxing match, as they say. But if you do that, if you prepare, like I'm not saying you're not going to be nervous. Of course you're going to be nervous. You won't have all this anxiety that like, you're wondering, do I belong in here? Do I not prepared? Because look, you've done everything you've put up to this point. If you go there and you completely bomb based on all this preparation, then like, look, it's not that big of a deal if you just take that as feedback and change your approach. But at least you're not sitting there wondering, like, could I have done more? Now let me kind of explain to you why I think this works so well. So, there's this idea in different cultures of the rite of passage, and you don't really do that so much here in the U.S. or the West. There's not real rites of passages anymore for youth, for people growing up, and I feel like I never had that growing up. Maybe sports was good for me, but the whole idea of a rite of passage is, in many cultures, it's supposed to take young men and women from their adolescence all the way to being an adult by putting them through a really challenging situation. Again, typically, sometimes it's just ritualistic, but the point is, it's supposed to be something that's very challenging, and that when you come out at the end, you're supposed to feel like a man, you're supposed to feel like a woman, and it's again, it's all psychological. It doesn't really make you a man or woman. Who actually knows? But it's like that psychological. It gives you that psychological confidence, right? One of my favorite movies, it's the cheesiest movie ever, is 300. About the 300 Spartans who held back the Persian invasion of Greece, right? There's one scene in the movie where the king Leonidas, when he's young, he has to go through the process, through the rite of passage to become a man, and they basically set him out in the wilderness, and they don't give him anything. He's got to survive and come back. If he can come back, if he comes back, he's able to be king and man and all that sort of stuff. So he's out there, basically kills a giant wolf, wears it as a jacket, and goes on king. And I'm relating that back to what we're talking about here. I know it sounds kind of odd, but really, by going through this process of really focusing on 1 or 2 months, you're training hard for the job interview. By the end of that, if you've done it right, if you've really committed time and effort to it, you've done everything you can, you spend as much time as you could, you will feel entitled to feel like you're prepared. Whether you're prepared or not doesn't really matter. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, right? Like, again, sometimes you can get the job based on your performance and interview. They just really like you, they have enthusiasm. And then look, sometimes you'll bomb the interview, they think you're great, they think you perform really well, but you just didn't meet the technical skill aspect of it. But either way, again, you get feedback and you can always change your approach. But it's way better than doing this. Here's the so they're setting themselves up to lose. And on top of that, too, they're going to have that. I'm not really prepared, I'm an imposter, I'm not really going to do this, somebody's going to call me out. And that's not what you want. So that's really it, guys. I hope you guys really like the video. Leave a like, as always. Subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want notifications anytime I put out new content. My channel is 100% about making awesome self-taught developers. I want people who watch my channel to get the leg up and really make their career a path to mastery, be the type of developer who's like a rock star. You just do damn near anything, really. Other than that, I highly recommend joining the Facebook group. If you want to do that, go to amycerkowitz.com/group. In there, it's all high quality. No negativity. I don't allow that. There's only high quality content expanding. I will post live events from time to time, and I try to post anything that I think would be helpful for people out there. Stuff that I basically won't post on my YouTube channel. So go ahead and join that now. I highly recommend it. You get a lot of value out of that. And yeah, that's really it's all about go now. So you guys have a great rest of your day, and as always, peace out. Take care.
The reason I say this is because I was lucky enough to expose testing when I was an organization that I worked for was running some testing. But I can just say, I don't know. It's called I would refer to this testing and really test driven development style of coding with like a very fast why is it so important? Because I've seen people who know it, didn't know passion was going on there, but they were very good. The web developer a lot of web developers really has to write the code and build the UIs. Right? That's not open. But when you actually go through the process of writing these help make that so reliable. Not only has to make sure that it works inside out, it has to be encryption, has to make sure that it works well with applications, it works with drive, or anything outside the application process. Working well, and you have to build time very often, making sure that you have and then run that to now you test that everything that can happen, but really increasing reliability for code. So bringing it early on will help you confident a little bit. And very beginning with the have to learn it. Now, you think it's like Those are my recommendations. That's basically the technical development, the technical development strategy. Hopefully you like them. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Other than that, please like the video, share, subscribe, and hit all any notifications. Hey guys, what's going on? I'm software developer, and today's video, I'm gonna give you that one weird trick that's gonna give you everything you use technology on a software developer. That's right. I just told Matt and you guys this whole time I really have the secret sauce. I didn't tell you about it. You want to listen to the world how it tells. Are you ready? Ready for this amazingness? That is my one weird secret trick to become a self-taught software developer. This. Are you ready? Write this down. First thing you're going to want to do is you want to do research about what type of software development you need. Looking at the job postings that are out there, seeing the type of skills that you're going to need for that job. So once you get those list of skills that you're going to need, then you're going to want to design about 4 to 6 applications that are going to implement those skills. Whatever it is. You have a list of 4 to 6 applications, then the next job is to execute on those applications and build out those applications. So again, 4 to 6 would be less, maybe more. Those would be 4 applications. You're going to heavily focus on the skills that you want to gain over the next months or year. And then once you complete all those applications, then you're going to start applying for jobs. When you get an interview, you're going to prepare for interview questions. You're going to do a ton of programming challenges in preparation for that. And then once you get your job interview, you sit there, you put all money, you get your first job, and that's the trick. All right. So now that you've got my trick, you can go away now, right? So all people who have attention spans for like 5 seconds, you can go away. The rest of you guys who stay this long, you know that there's quite a lot more to it than just that. I'll break down exactly what I consider the correct path for becoming a software developer. So let's actually break down what I talked about and how you can start becoming one. So first things first, the first module of some people get really crazy with this. They start obsessing with this aspect. Never moving on. So here is what I would say. When you are in the beginning stages, just figure out your own direction. Right? So if you have a compass, sometimes it's just good to know that you're heading there, not necessarily exactly where you're heading. So in the same regard, if you have heard of different type of software development you're interested in, and that's a really good place to start. Now, if you know exactly what type of software development you want to do, then that's obviously better. It will refine and help focus your efforts. But the first part of any strategy has to be figuring out where the general result that you want from your endeavor, where you're going to, where you're heading. Once you figure out where All of those things that you see. Once you get a pretty clear sense of what potential employers are looking for in the hierarchy, that's when you actually go to the next stage. So, the portfolio stage is another sort of bottleneck in people's stage of ongoing what happens is you start fighting over the best application they can possibly write. They start obsessing over like what's the best thing I can write, what's the next big app that I can write that really will impress people. And the truth is that really the way that you should look at your applications in your portfolio, right? The way that you should view your portfolio is that it's to your learning. It's not for other people to on you. It's not for to show off to the world. That's not the primary reason. So the primary reason is you set it up in a way that makes you more useful, right? So right now, say you don't have any skills, but you want to see something well. One thing I tell you is really learn your best. You really learn the version of your skill, right? So that would be something that should be on your list. That way you're building an application. Some you to focus on don't worry about what yes, definitely you don't have to fight over it. You once you pick something and you know it's pretty good, don't obsess over it, don't come back with constant think really it's about building up the skills and making sure that you're that list of skills that you have. Now the next part is equally as hard as the part the longest part. Right? Actually executing building your project. More time you're just sitting there and executing. You actually have to fill that application. Honestly, most of that stuff, in my opinion, is right here, right? It's between how you stay creative, how you stay disciplined, how you stay enthusiastic over a long course of time. It's months. Training will come on the job when you get the job next week. More than anything else, that process of executing on your game, how do you bare minimum. So once you complete all your applications, again, once you complete it, completion, you have 50% of one done, 80% of one done, you're like, oh, that's done. Then you run it. You're actually going to start this part is pretty easy to meet. You are strategies, you want to networking, you know that you're looking for a job, you know job sites, you have a resume, all of your job sites, and you should be under that. Some applications I had sent out. You should shop them. Recruiters, meetups, anything you can do just to get your foot in the door where you can possibly sell yourself, right? As I said, I like that word, but at the end of this, showing people your best qualities and saying, hey, I'm really dedicated, dedicated to this process of becoming a software developer. I want to work with that. What can you do to get there? So that's the next process, is that applying for jobs, which again, 100% of the goal of applying for jobs is to get in front of somebody who can hire you. So that's the next step in the pipeline. Once you get someone that you get in front of someone, right? Like once you're at that stage of the process, is you want to focus on these three things. Right? So one is you want to focus on who you are. You want to focus on what you're presenting to the world. You got to bring the most positive attitude out. You have to bring the most. You have to bring your best self into the that not the fake one, not the one that is just trying to do something. That's great. It's about really to me about just being your positive attitude self. So really think about how to present yourself best, how to present your best abilities to the world. There's plenty of material on this. I will cover it more in detail. If you want to know specifically what I'm talking about, it's just about being a positive attitude person, be on time, wear the right clothes, be professional, but always be like eager and enthusiastic about the vibe and things. That's number one, right? That you have to do that. I don't care how much like still you are, you're not making like the juice, as I like to say, like the good vibes and the good energy. Good luck. Good luck with that. You're not, even if you do get hired, I think the wrong company because they're going to hire people who are, I don't know, it's just not the right fit. So that's number one. Bring the juice, bring the best self. Number two is be prepared for the technical questions. So again, now you know where you're kind of heading, you know what type of job you're looking for. You should be able to talk about technical skills or technical questions just based on your experience with one. Then you should also be reviewing or making questions for yourself or finding questions that you can answer and just recording yourself, answering those questions, answering it to friends or learning to sit there and listen to you talk. Whatever it is, just figure out a way to practice your technical questions, practice answering technical questions if you don't know, have a really good way of explaining something you don't know. I always had an answer for when I didn't know a question was asking. I always wanted to be able to answer and say I had like a routine for it. So like I never was like I'm stopping you and got nervous and then also just that. Now the last thing that is obviously really important is you have to prepare for potentially a programming challenge. So I was lucky in both jobs that I've gotten. Never really needed a programming challenge. It sort of had to be one that I didn't have to do on the spot. But believe me, for the next place that I ever want to go to, if I ever want to go to Google or something like that, I absolutely have to focus on programming challenges and have a time to do it. So you at least need to be prepared to do some sort of coding challenge. So code, there's the cracking the code book habit is something I have in my head all the time. You guys all probably know about it. The cracking the code book is like the Bible for people who are trying to get a job. As the time gets closer to when you actually be applying for a job, you really don't want to hit that book hard. You're going to want to have programming challenges just in general on any of the websites that are out there right now that will allow you to do that. Because it's almost like a boxer training for like you don't want to really be good at programming challenges all the time. That's kind of like a skill that I don't think necessarily see companies that are demand for. But when you're going for a job, you definitely have to have that skill of being able to do a programming challenge, being able to explain what you're doing, and having the confidence to just do it in general. That's really important. You get closer and closer to the job. That's the big overarching plan. So you want to do something about what you want to do. Then you want to create a portfolio of applications that research, you want to execute a plan. Right? You start finding jobs, which really to me means like just trying to get in front of people entirely. And then lastly, you're going to actually work on the job interview part of it, make sure you're 100% prepared, and then you obviously will get your job. Go off the sunset, right? So that's the ideal plan, and that's what I've really found work for me, and I've seen it work for other people who have encountered who have done self. That's it. That's really my plan. They want to touch plans, and I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know. So, as always, the best subscribe button to the bell icon for notifications anytime I put up a content. That is all based around the idea that I want to teach anyone, anywhere, how to come to self-taught software, how to learn yourself to make that next step and change. what's up with me here and stuff like that. That is the question. Should you do it self? Do it on your own. Company paid stuff like that. So, you guys haven't heard my story before, definitely check it out. I'll put a link right here. So, a lot of people ask the question, should I go to boot camp? Should I go back to school? Should I get a 4-year degree in something like computer science? Or should I just go to the And I am not, if you're watching my videos, you know I'm not the person who just like, yeah, do this. This is the best way to do it. I'm more like that. I always try to come at it with context. Right? There's nuance in everything. So let's just step back and talk a little bit about why I would self-taught route. I didn't just decide to go to boot camp, or I didn't put all of my eggs in school back. I did eventually have to school. After I got a good job, I read the key. So when I first learned that I could become a software developer, talking to my friend who recommended it to me, read a little bit ahead for JavaScript, and something clicked in my brain. I said, "Oh shit, this is the real deal. I got to take it serious. And I got to go." At that point in time, I didn't want to do, I didn't want to pay out of pocket and just go do things. I never heard about boot camp, so I never probably thought about that as an option. And then school, my friend had recommended that read about school. He said, do it later on. He said, like, go to the self-taught route as far as you can, and then enroll when you want to start applying for jobs. Get the job, get out. But more than anything else, all I could think about was I do this on my own. Like, this isn't my first go around in terms of trying to learn something that I didn't know. So I got into car sales, and I've never done car sales. That's awesome. So something that's really cool and really just working on car sales and marketing. Track house, my personality, pressure to sell, pressure.
Yeah.